Society frames high intelligence as a biological cheat code, a winning lottery ticket that guarantees wealth, influence, and an easy path to the top. The data tells a much darker story. True cognitive exceptionalism is a psychological burden. From the outside, we see the accolades, the elite degrees, the rapid promotions, the executive titles. What we do not see is the severe isolation underneath, the crushing anxiety of never doing enough, and a persistent gnawing sensation of not belonging to the world around them. A brilliant mind does not operate like an average brain running at a higher clock speed. It is wired completely differently. For that mind to actually reach its promised potential, it first has to go through an agonizing systemic breakdown. To understand what intelligence actually is, we have to look at the specific psychological life cycle that tears the gifted mind apart and forces it to rebuild from the wreckage. This graph illustrates a clinical phenomenon known as asynchronous development. As you can see, the line tracking a gifted individual's intellectual capacity rockets upward on an exponential curve, but the lower line, mapping their emotional regulation and physical maturity, progresses at a slow, linear crawl. Look at the massive gulf opening up between these two trajectories. This negative space represents a child grappling with the complex injustices and existential threats of the adult world, but who only has the emotional coping mechanisms of an 8-year-old to process them. They have the awareness, but they lack the armor. This structural gap is compounded by something psychologists call overexcitabilities. These are extreme, heightened neurological responses to everyday stimuli. A standard mind filters out the vast majority of sensory input, emotional dissonance, and abstract problems. An overexcitable mind absorbs all of it at maximum volume. They experience thoughts, fears, and empathy with a crushing intensity that an average brain simply blocks out. When a highly intelligent person appears erratic, intense, or neurotic, it is rarely a character flaw. Their baseline experience of reality is a constant barrage of unfiltered, overwhelming information. To survive a world that operates on a much lower frequency, intelligent individuals develop a defense mechanism, masking. They deliberately suppress their natural curiosity. They dumb down their abstract theories just to navigate low-stakes social rituals and avoid the blank stares of their peers. Running this social camouflage takes immense cognitive energy. The constant act of performing an acceptable version of themselves leads to extreme exhaustion. Worse, it feeds a chronic cycle of imposter syndrome, where they convince themselves their successes are fraudulent because they are always playing a role. This exhaustion eventually triggers gifted kid burnout. Society piles on intense pressure to achieve, pushing individuals into educational and corporate systems that prioritize rote memorization and compliance over actual mastery. To the gifted mind, these environments quickly reveal themselves as arbitrary and hollow. There is a breaking point. The individual stops pouring their energy into the camouflage. They realize the corporate ladders, social hierarchies, and expected milestones are completely artificial constructs. They drop the mask. But dropping the mask means losing their connection to the group. Exhausted and detached from the norms that organize everyone else's lives, they find themselves entirely isolated, setting the stage for a catastrophic mental collapse. In the mid-20th century, psychiatrist Kazimierz Dombrowski mapped this exact collapse. He called it the theory of positive disintegration. Dombrowski argued that the initial, automatic way we learn to live, our lower integration, is inadequate for the gifted mind. For true psychological growth to occur, that early personality structure must be dissolved. The mind has to literally fall apart. This collapse often takes the form of existential depression. Unlike standard clinical depression, which might stem from trauma or chemical imbalances, this state is a direct byproduct of hyper-awareness. The individual perceives the vastness of time, their own smallness in the universe, and the lack of inherent meaning in human behavior, and they are paralyzed by it. We see this specific paralysis throughout history. It is a recurring symptom among our most consequential thinkers and writers. Virginia Woolf documented this relentless internal friction for her entire adult life. Ernest Hemingway and countless other creative geniuses wrestled with the exact same abyss. Their intellect allowed them to see the world with perfect clarity, but that clarity stripped away the comforting illusions that protect the rest of us. They fall into a state of existential isolation. This is the stark realization that because of how your mind operates, your true internal world is entirely inaccessible to anyone else alive. You are permanently alone in your own head. This is the most dangerous phase of the gifted life cycle. When the previous framework of reality shatters, the risk of severe self-sabotage, addiction, and self-harm spikes. Many brilliant individuals get trapped right here, devolving into chronic underachievement. The mind is now scattered in the dark. The individual is forced into a brutal binary choice: remain broken in the abyss or attempt an agonizing psychological reconstruction. Dabrowski called the way out reintegration. The individual stops trying to fit the world's mold and painstakingly builds an entirely new, self-authored hierarchy of values. They replace society's expectations with their own conscious, deliberate principles. Reaching this higher level changes how they interact with humanity. They stop trying to maintain dozens of superficial relationships, actively trading social breadth for profound psychological depth. This diagram illustrates what psychologists call the paradox of intelligent solitude. On one side, you have the typical social network, broad, shallow, and highly connected. On the other is the highly integrated mind, a single, glowing, isolated node. It marks the hard boundary between painful, unwanted loneliness and intentional, restorative solitude. Highly intelligent individuals actively choose this solitude. For their neurological wiring, spending 10 hours alone solving a complex, abstract problem, writing, or building a system is biologically more rewarding than participating in the daily rituals of the tribe. They aren't hiding from society, and they haven't been rejected by the group. They have simply outgrown the world's default operating system. High intelligence is not an effortless gift you passively receive. It is a heavy psychological weight that you must actively survive. The majority of society will continue to ignore this reality, acknowledging the severe toll of true cognitive awareness, the anxiety, the isolation, the necessary destruction of the self is deeply uncomfortable. But if you recognize this weight, if you have felt the isolation of asynchronous development, you do not have to navigate the abyss alone. Embrace the reality of the brilliant mind and join the syndicate by subscribing, because true brilliance is never handed to you. It is earned, piece by piece, only through the crucible of disintegration.